Hi. My name's Jon Burgess. I'm a Senior Commissioned Officer with Herefordshire Council. I've covered a lot of different areas, but recently taken on this role for carers. So partly to do with the strategy for the council for the next 5 years, but also there'll be recommissioning of different services as well. The purpose of this is really to try and engage with as many people as possible. So carers, the carers are everywhere. And this, by carers I mean unpaid carers, and sort of like to say everybody, depending on what service you provide, where you provide it, or who you are, you're probably going to know somebody. And it's just trying to find a way, like I say, engaging, trying to get as much information back to what happens next. It can feed into the strategy going forward. So let's just see if I can work this. There we go. I should just say before I start as well, I am partially sighted, so I sort of like work my way through, and I can do as much as do. But if my head suddenly dips, please bear with me if I sort of like to miss out on something. But anyway, so here we are. So the general definition of an unpaid carer, which is a friend or family member who provides some care or support for any amount of hours to help somebody because of a disability, a mental health condition, ill health, addiction, and without that support, the individual would be unable to cope. So that's the general thing. A person can be of any age, and the care can be for any amount of time, from a few hours to almost a full-time job. And similarly, you don't have to live with the person to be their carer, so you can be a friend down the road to deliver that care. So it covers an awful lot of people are covered by that definition. I think I'll probably mention this again in a bit. There's an interesting thing which I think about quite a bit about carers. Is it all right if I take this off? I'm ringing, and I think I can probably shout in this. Right, can you still hear me okay? Yeah. Yes, okay, so I'm just going to shout because the interesting thing about carers, the difficulty sometimes, agencies talk about the difficulty about identifying carers. And I think part of that is because we talk about carers, and what carers are husbands, their wives, their sons, their daughters, and they're initially parents, absolutely. And initially you just do what you would do in that situation, so you don't recognise what you're doing necessarily as a carer, and it's not often until things get to a point or somebody comes along and asks you particularly about what you do, where you sort of go, and I think it is that separation from what would be your loving, your caring relationship role into one which can then be abstracted to you're a carer in this big sort of like this group. So I think it's just, for me, it's sort of like, I think it's worth saying that and sort of keeping hold of that. Right, now that's what that. So yes, going through, so the sort of the 2021 census for Herefordshire identified about one in 10 people identify themselves in the census as being a carer, and that's broadly similar with England and Wales, so we're like there or thereabouts. There's, of those people that came forward, about 9,000 provided 19 hours or less care per week. 3,000 identified were providing between 20 and 49 hours each week, with 5,000 providing over 50 hours a week. Right, here we go, big numbers. So this figure here, this was in 2011. So if you look at the NHS commitment to care, that they make reference to it, as lots of people do, it's the replacement cost. So this is taken for the census in 2011. So basically, if for one reason or another all carers stopped doing that and all the care that's provided by them unpaid had to then be sort of provided by NHS services or social care, it's estimated that it would be £119 billion. Since then, we've had the 2021 census, and that figure has now been revised. Because I think there are lots of places and lots of services and organisations will help carers just by dint of the work that they do, even though they may not see themselves as specifically a carer support service. But obviously there's the commission service from the council, which is Herefordshire Carers Links, and we have some people over there who sort of like who represent them, but so they're commissioned to provide support one-to-one, just going out into the community, and I'm sure they'd be more than welcome to speak to anybody if you've got any questions about that. After there's the dementia meeting places. These are very interesting for people with dementia. So they're called meeting places or dementia cafes. You've got them in Lemps, there's in Ross, there's some in Hereford as well. But as well as helping the people there to support the person with dementia, they're very much there to help the carers as well. So they'll do work with carer supporting roles. And there are many others. There's the Early Helps HVOS. They provide services to young carers and sort of like after school clubs, activities. And I know that they're used by the Early Help service as well. So there's a lot of stuff, a lot of activities that do take place. But we'll come back onto that in a minute. So the previous strategy was published in 2017. It is now out, hence why this work is taking place now. Out of that there was a change to the way that services, carer services were supported in Herefordshire, and that's when we changed the commission service of Herefordshire Carers Links. That made some movements, and some of the work which took place before was moved to different areas. Moving forward now, looking at the current strategy, we've identified a number of themes to look at, to focus on as it stands at the moment. Part of what we're going to do in a second is to just getting that feedback, just to make sure that we're on the right track, but also that you may have other ideas or thoughts which could feed into it. There's a working group taking place. There's a number of people in this room that have been part of the working group, and we're just trying to get as much information coming back in before we start to push things down. I will just go through. One of the areas, one of the key areas is young carers. Not because we want to focus that it's just about young carers, but young carers tend to be much more difficult to identify. And it's about making sure that services can be provided appropriately, and just to see what more we can do to help what is a very invisible, potentially invisible group, and to help them. So there's that. The assessments and support. The council generally, as well as the strategy taking place, the council generally in adult services are just looking at the way that assessments take place, and a whole raft of things really that involve carers, as much as anything just about how we respond to carers, and really accepting and trying to put in place that acceptance that they place. Really important. That's not to say that they didn't before, but it's just trying to change the focus, how one reacts to and behaves. So there's work taking place there around that. There's also some thoughts about assessments, how assessments for carers take place. The council is obliged under the Care Act and the Children and Families Act 2004, if you recognise that person as a carer or a young carer, that an assessment should take place to make sure, as much as anything, that all the support needs are identified. Again, then you've got other services that provide financial support, help with benefits. So just looking at those types of things to make sure we're getting it right. Then we've got technology, really technology-enabled care. I get told off for doing this. There's some pilots taking place across Herefordshire at the moment with digital technology, and this is a real movement up from the pendants that people know, or sort of like the alarm systems. These are really sophisticated pieces of equipment which can be used, which can help to monitor how people are in the homes. Are they sort of like eating enough? Are they drinking enough? Are they taking exercise? Whereabouts are they? And it's not spying, this is for people that can be quite ill. But as well as being able to help the person that's being supported at home, you also then, for people who are caring, can be reassured because there are apps that can be used to keep an eye. So there's some real changes taking place in the provision of technology and how that can be used. But obviously in a place like Herefordshire, there may be problems that sort of come along with that. And then finally, just looking at information and resources. This is a continuous thing which goes on, information and resources, because we're forever looking. But there are some key elements. So the Talk Community website, that's currently being changed and revamped. I think it's fair to say over the last few years it's not been quite as smooth running as it might have been, and sometimes it's a bit of a challenge to find the information you want. That will be changing. It will be much slicker, it will be much more intuitive in terms of gathering information that you want. We want to make sure as well there's information around carers in there and that it links together. Similarly to all community hubs, taking advantage of those areas out in the local communities, so we don't just focus information etc. on those the usual, the city centre and the large market towns, but how do we get information and resources out into some of the smaller areas. So whistle stop tour through that. If anybody's got any questions at the moment, I'm happy to answer them. I might need you to point people out if anybody wants to say anything. Otherwise, we will.
Anyone got any questions for Jon at this point?
The rise in numbers, is there any information around that, on what area that's in? Is it young people, is it to do with mental health problems or addictions, or in carers?
If you're referring to the figures, that's just an inflation rise really, because actually the numbers of carers have actually dropped for Herefordshire. So those figures that I showed were obviously for nationally rather than for Herefordshire, but the actual numbers in Herefordshire between the last census and this one have actually dropped by about, I can't remember, I think it's about 7%. But it's difficult to draw out where, in what situation. The thing, I'm sure if somebody could delve down into ONS figures, I'm sure there's probably some way of identifying, but unfortunately I couldn't answer that question for you.
Thanks, Jon. We're obviously involved in this, a number of us, but it's just to say almost all voluntary organisations, through the people that they support, they are involved with families who are primarily doing a lot of the caring. So it's a plea and a hope that within the strategy there's a lot more focus on the role of the voluntary sector, including the horrible F word around funding for people who are supporting those carers, be it organisations or the support the individuals need.
Going to have to be political at this moment in time and say this is right. Absolutely, I would hope that to be true. We're looking at, but there, like I say, there are a number of people involved in the working group, and sort of like just looking at how that is taken forward. But I think it's fair to say not just the council, but all agencies that recognise just how important unpaid carers are to the continued functioning of many different services.
Julie.
Will there be an opportunity for more targeted support for parents and family carers of children and young people with SCND, specifically in school holidays when their networks of support shut down and their access to other places for support or respite aren't there?
I couldn't say, but what we're going to do now in the exercise is just to sort of like write down, so there'll be someone that you'll be asked questions, to feedback, but where there is a specific thing like that, I think that is very important, because those are the sorts of bits of information we need to be sort of holding on to and flagging up and saying this is, I would hope so, but then that's going back to the SEN, to the early help teams, and sort of understanding how those things go. But please do make a point of writing that down. And I'm sorry, I can't give you a definite answer on that.
Kim?
Hi. You mentioned about carers assessment for adult social care.
Yeah.
At present, when carers do have an assessment, there doesn't seem to be anything to be offered to them. Is there any funding for anything other than signposting them to carers links?
I think one of the challenges around a carer's assessment when it takes place, because often what the assessment does, if they identify that there's perhaps some support or some respite needed, the care then gets given to the person that's being cared for, if you so to speak. You know, so you end up either through respite or a sitting service. So
There are no sitting services though, are there?
No.
no, and I think this is a challenge. It's looking at it again. It's raising those ideas through this. It could be channeled. It can be channeled up, and I think it will depend. Again, I think if you are in certain parts of the county, those sorts of services will be much more difficult to identify and put in place than they might do if you're sort of like in Herefordshire. Absolutely, I take the point about sort of like the challenge of finding sitting services or respite care and identifying that need.
I suppose, John, one helpfulness about strategy is not just how it might inform the council's commissioning intentions around carers, but potentially illustrating that need for perhaps community groups to seek charitable funds and other things to support some of those elements.
I think that's right, absolutely. There's a wider sort of opportunity, there may be wider opportunities of obtaining funding to look at and sort of like see that there is a need to help and identify and to go forward. And I think it is, the big challenge, the council will not be able to do it all, as we know, through all the things. So the engagement, identifying the key priorities and finding other ways of sort of like meeting those needs, it will be very important. Thank you.
Andy?
Hi. I'm sure you're aware of this, but I've not heard it recognised yet, so I just thought I'd ask the question. One of the biggest problems of carers accessing services is that they're often very time poor, they're stressed and can't get away from their partner, they feel very committed and providing such demanding care. They're the ones that are heading for crisis and probably the ones that need the most support. I just wondered if that was being recognised in the forthcoming strategy and if you had anything to say on it.
Yeah, I think, again, it is recognised, that challenge because, when things go wrong because of a carer who's stressed, who's becoming unwell, is not getting the time, if they then feel unable or just for their own ill health are unable to provide that care, then all of a sudden other agencies have to step in. And it doesn't take very long, really, many of those cases before the money which goes into support carers agencies, carer services, or the things that are around it, is actually outstripped by the amount of money that goes into to provide emergency crisis interventions. So I personally, and I speak personally here, I think there is a very good argument for improving the offer to sort of like to provide care. But again, it's not going to solve everything, and there are big challenges. Herefordshire, as we know, just in provision of care into the Golden Valley or over to Kington, some of those places, there are real challenges. So going back to the point that Christine was making there about how do other agencies, how do other groups look at and find ways of perhaps identifying. And I think and going right back to the beginning, that's just raising awareness about unpaid carers so that all agencies look at it and just have a sort of like an idea that actually there are people out there that sort of like are quite, perhaps, almost invisible and probably unlikely to put their hands up and say, well, by the way, I'm a carer. So I think it's just to sort of like see what can be done through agencies, different organisations, and the council and NHS services. And I think the work that Gillian is just talking about there, some of the work going on, they're probably capturing all sorts of people in similar situations. So there are ways of changing approaches.
I suppose that preventative approach of supporting carers to avoid burnout, potentially to have resilience plans in place, look at contingency planning, and I know that's probably what you do at Carers Links, but probably that is the end to be looking at, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that has worked very well in other areas, and I know there are bits that go, is peer support groups, peer support networks, and speaking to people how valuable those can be, just to sit down with your peers and just talk about and manage or just to moan about situations, just to be able to share an experience with people that understand. So there are lots of different things that can happen.
I'm going to take 2 more questions and then we need to crack on with the workshop. So I'm going to go to Sue first and then Philippa.
Hi, so it's Sue Mosley, Age UK, Hereford and Localities. We've been running a series of Living Well roadshows across the county in order to reach out to vulnerable older people where they're living over the last few months. And I think one of the biggest issues for us in terms of older carers is they don't perceive themselves as being older carers. Also, a plea, come to us for information. Every single day we are supporting older people who are caring for a significant other in their lives. And we've got some quite tight data and good data about carers across the county.
That's really good. I do attend the Dementia Partnership Board and Dementia, and I've brought up about this, but I absolutely will sort of like this presentation will go out. If you want to send me a direct email on my email address, if that's okay, and sort of make contact, or I'll just contact the office. But absolutely,
yeah. And we work. We're co-located with Dementia Matters here, which is great for us.
Okay.
But this is sort of older people across the board who are supporting people in the homes.
Thank you.
I was just going to pick up on, actually, Christina just said. I think picking up on what Andy was saying, it's that preventative bit, an early intervention. So from my experience watching it within families, if you wait till things get to crisis and that carer is then unable to cope, and I've heard them sort of say, I really don't think I can cope, I don't think I can do another day. It's gone too far.
Yeah.
So the prevention within the community in early intervention will actually be less costly than the social services coming in. And I think that's what I'd like to try and get out of this strategy, is that we can help try and quantify how that could be provided better within the community with a bit of support, but actually could save some money in the long term by preventing people getting to that crisis.
Yes, absolutely. That should help.